Mr. Chair, the nominee is coming at a very critical time. Should this House, through this committee, approves him? And there's been a bit of some controversy back and forth, particularly on the marginal areas of this country, which of course is known as arid and semi-arid areas or counties, which then is about 70–80% of the country in terms of network, Honorable Chair, for purpose of communication, security, and so on. And what's the controversy? The controversy is that, for example, Safaricom don't want to do network or build masts there for people to access network. Why? They think that it is not economical, because then people cannot, or maybe they cannot get enough money from the people living around there for purpose of communication. And therefore, Celtel, Telcom, and Safaricom are not interested about this area, 70% of the country. Now, Honorable Owalo, should you be, what will you consider? Because there's this fund called Universal Service Fund, which was established by the people of Kenya because of that, so that this fund can be able to build networks in those areas so that Kenyans can access network. But nothing much has been done. What will you do in your 100 days? Will you promise this House that in your 100 days, because millions of those Kenyans living in those areas now are listening to you and watching and saying, what will you do? Will you take that one as one of your performance contracts from ourselves, from myself on behalf, and say you will be able to take this fund to where it is supposed to have been working, which is those areas which people consider uneconomical, and yet there are people of Kenya living there. I thank you, Chair.
George.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Nominee, we represent rural constituencies, and a while back we were encouraged through CDF to construct ICT hub centers. Not many were constructed because I think there were reservations, because people felt the ministry may not be able to carry this through. But in your own estimation, and upon being confirmed if that is going to happen, do you undertake to us, even to Parliament, that if these ICT hubs are constructed, you will quickly move in, equip them, and our youths are able to access ICT through those hubs for purposes of employment, research, and whatever else we have to do through those hubs?
Of Kwanza. I see. My name is Ferdinand Wanyonyi of Kwanza constituency. I have seen some bit of realignment of the parastatals in the government, to the extent that even some departments are realigned wrongly. I know of a case where I've been discussing with my colleagues here as well. You find that irrigation department, which is basically in agriculture, was moved to, I know irrigation is water, but what you irrigate crops, is moved to blue economy. I don't know by name or whatever, the arrangement of that. And if you have been a consultant, I see you're very vast in this, and I respect you for that reason. Again, we have had a case where government bought shares from telecom. Yeah. Now I think it's, so to say, is now state on. Telecom is state on. I don't know for what reason this has happened. And now you find now telecom is not doing the same thing. We used to use it for parcel of land, moving the communication by land. Now it's no longer there. I'd rather get matatu, put whatever I have to take to my country, up country, instead of using the post office. What's your view on this? Am I right or you're right to have done this arrangement, which I think, in my view, is actually taking us backward? Or is it for individual gains?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mukami, the last, this batch.
Thank you, our nominee. I'm impressed you've done your homework. What will you do to safeguard talent and intellectual property for the youth who will be the drivers of the digital economy. And I would also like to know what you think about the split of Safaricom to M-Pesa and Voice. Thank you.
You can quickly answer those, Eliud.
Okay, first of all, from Honorable Massey, the issue of mainstreaming the development of arts and culture, the creative economy. One, what we need to do, first of all, is to tackle this issue by understanding the functional domains which fall within this sector. We have got music, we have got design, we have got theater, just to mention but a few, and even arts and crafts. Now, this is an economy, Mr. Chairman, that envisages to exploit the potential of hitherto untapped capabilities amongst our youth. How do we do this? First of all, there is need for appropriate legal and regulatory framework in this industry. We have got the Copyright Act. This needs to be strengthened, yeah, so that the intellectual properties of these young people is not taken advantage of by middlemen or based on dysfunctionalities in the marketplace. Two, we need to empower these people through provision of adequate access to capital. How do we do this? If I'm confirmed and I take over office, I need to initiate the Kenya Film Bill and liaise with the House so that it becomes an act that will facilitate the establishment of a film fund, Mr. Chairman, that can facilitate access to cheap credit, provision of widely accessible credit, but also being disbursed at optimal rates of interest, way below the prevailing market or bank rates, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, is he coming back? Chair?
Yes.
Is he coming back to my question or does he
I missed your question. Oh, yes, Honorable Owen Bayer. The issue of restructuring, yeah? Oh, yes, I've developed many strategic plans, but then there's a disconnect between the number of strategic plans I've developed and what has been witnessed by way of results. Now, let me clarify, Mr. Chairman, that strategy has got three facets. There's the component of strategy formulation, there's the facet of strategy implementation, there's the facet of strategy monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. All these facets of strategy, Mr. Chairman, are anchored on what critical success factor, which is leadership. We don't have a shortage of strategic plans in this country. Historically, since independence, we have always developed good strategic plans. But we have been having a leadership deficit. What do I mean by a leadership deficit? Anytime you come up with a major change program, you must have a transformational leadership that can facilitate effective implementation of those change programs, while at the same time ensuring that you have got an elaborate risk mitigation framework, Mr. Chairman. We have had good plans, but the will to implement some of these plans has been a challenge, based on leadership at the top echelons, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy, Mr. Chairman, that today, under the Kenya Kwanza government, we have got a leadership that is transformational, a leadership that is a change agent, a leadership that is ready and willing to venture into hitherto unfamiliar territories for the benefit of the Kenyan people. And I believe that in the next phase of our strategic planning cycle, where we are going to develop the 2023-2022 strategic plan for ministries and the implementing agencies, we will not just come up with strategic plans that will not be implemented, Mr. Chairman. So that then will facilitate successful implementation of the strategic plans. Okay. So the answer is leadership deficit has been a problem. The issue of mainstreaming of arts, that one I've answered. The issue of whether students will have access to technology. I believe in the principles of equity, impartiality, and equitability, Mr. Chairman. We are going to enhance the ICT infrastructure indiscriminately to all parts of the country so that we have got adequate ICT infrastructure in every village up to every household, Mr. Chairman, so that our ICT functional domain can contribute to the extent of the envisaged 10% of the GDP, Mr. Chairman. Issue of KBC, yes, I agree with Mheshimiwa again that we need to look at staff motivation. My position on this is as below, Mr. Chairman. One, the remuneration structures in government are largely regulated by the Salaries Review Commission. But as a consultant, I believe that our remuneration architecture should be informed by an objective job evaluation exercise, whether it is done by SRC or any other private sector provider. But the guiding principle should be the ability to pay. If KBC was turned around through an effective turnaround strategy and it became viable, feasible, and has the ability to pay, nothing stops you from telling SRC that, look, these are the salaries and remuneration levels that you are proposing to enable us attract and retain the staff that we already have. We want to benchmark our salaries and benefits levels with the prevailing market rates, and we have got the ability to pay. SRC will not stop you. The only problem we have in the public sector, Mr. Chairman, is that organizations rely, or largely, parastatals rely largely on the exchequer for purposes of funding. We need to move away from that space so that we become creative and innovative by way of exploring new and more viable means of resource mobilizations, anchored on an appropriate and elaborate innovative resource mobilization strategy, Mr. Chairman. Of course, backed up with diversification of the revenue streams. Issues of sponsorships, which I've undertaken over a long period of time to our sporting fraternity, Gor Mahia, AFC, and the like. Yes, I agree with you fully and exclusively that we need to cascade this down to the lowest levels. Just yesterday, I was having a discussion with my counterpart nominee for sports, Honorable Ababu Namwamba, and this is something that we want to pursue together, Mr. Chairman. I've got a lot of passion for sports and development of the hitherto untapped youth talent. As to whether or not digitization will lead to the cutting down of employment, I think that is the traditional thinking as opposed to the innovating thinking, Mr. Chairman. We can grow the two hand in hand by leveraging on technology while at the same time exploiting that potential to create jobs. It's a question of how creative we are. Let us not deploy the traditional approach that where there is one additional computer, one person must go home. On the issue of fiber optic network, as to whether or not, or the issue of Exim Bank of Kenya having been a lender through an opaque system, I would seek indulgence of the House that you allow me, if I'm approved by this committee, to get into the House so that I hold adequate consultations with my counterpart at the National Treasury at that point in time, so that based on the principle of collective responsibility in government, Mr. Chairman, I'm not coming up with a proposition before this committee that will not stand the test of time. On the issue of monopolies and whether or not...
Yes, Mole.
Thank you.
Why don't you let him finish, then you seek your clarification?
I just want him to finish one for all because it's something...
Oh,
okay, fine.
Okay. On the issue of monopolies and whether or not that can cause disproportionalities in the market space, Mr. Chairman, my stand is that the role of government is to put in place an enabling policy and regulatory framework that ensures that we have got a level playing ground in the marketplace. Once that is in place, then it is incumbent upon each and every player in that space to exercise its strategic agility and maneuverability for effective positioning in that marketplace to attain both comparative advantage and competitiveness. So I would really not want to go or buy the argument that monopolies will lead to market efficiencies, and therefore we need to go a step further and curtail strongly performing organizations so that they come to the same level with organizations which are inefficient. Organizations have to be creative, innovative to survive. And in that operational environment, Mr. Chairman, it is cutthroat competition, and it is incumbent upon you as a player to cut your own niche in that operational environment. Ours is to provide an enabling legal, regulatory, and policy environment as government. The issue of semi-autonomous areas, yes, as to whether or not we will extend the ICT infrastructure into those places, yes, and we will actually leverage on the Universal Service Fund, yeah, so that we utilize the resources available within that basket to extend the ICT infrastructure to those places so that we have got some equity and equitability in the provision of ICT infrastructure, Mr. Chairman. The issue of constructing ICT hubs or centers, this will be cascaded down to the lowest levels, Mr. Chairman. We will continue with this. It is already work in progress, and we will continue with this to the lowest levels of our operations, of the bottom of the pyramid, so that as we extend this, it is also in tandem with our bottom-up economic proposition. The issue of realignment of government functions with the mandates, functional mandates of the ministries. Executive orders, Mr. Chairman, are not cast on stone. They are developed by human beings. As and when there is an anomaly detected, yeah, within what the functional mandates of various ministries espouses, and where the implementing agencies are domiciled, this can always be relooked at. In fact, as I speak, ourselves as cabinet nominees, we have been asked already just to look at the executive order and propose any value proposition based on these functional mandates to facilitate effective alignment. So this can be done, it will be done, and it has always been done, Mr. Chairman. The issue of telecom, as to whether we are reverting to state ownership, I'm a strong believer that the work of government is to provide an enabling legal and regulatory framework as opposed to competing with the private sector in business, Mr. Chairman. But for strategic reasons, which I had mentioned earlier, we also need to recognize that Telecom Kenya has at its disposal or within its jurisdiction a critical mass of strategic infrastructure. That space has to be looked at from various facets of government, not just the ICT ministry itself. It has got to be looked at from the National Treasury, from the Ministry of Interior, and again, based on the principle of collective responsibility within government, I promise that if I assume office, I will discuss and get to a level playing ground or develop a common denominator with my counterparts, and we will come up with a feasible way forward as far as telecom is concerned within the short run. The issue of safeguarding talent and intellectual property, I believe that answered that again. We need to strengthen the legal and regulatory framework. I've talked about the enforcement of the copyright law. I've also talked about the issue of just ensuring that we eliminate duplicity of effort between the Kenya Film Corporation and the Kenya Film Classification Board. Through a relevant bill taken to Parliament, Mr. Chairman, we can actually, in my view, end up with one entity that can take care of the whole of that space, while charged with the mandate of ensuring optimal exploitation of the talent that we have amongst our youth on one hand, and also through the establishment and operationalization of a Kenya Film Fund, ensuring that we have got adequate provision of finances to these young people on the other, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, through Chairman, spirit of Safaricom.
You see, Mr. Chairman, there are very basic but fundamental economic principles that we need to conform or align to in the private sector. Safaricom has got two main facets. There's the telco side and there's the finance side. The telco side will largely be regulated by policy formulation from the ICT and Digital Economy Ministry. On the flip side of it, the money side, based on the law, needs to be regulated by provisions of the CBK Act. I believe that to facilitate effective regulation, this is what has informed the envisaged split between the two functional domains, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mole.
Thank you. Probably, nominee, you need to understand my question is coming from the basis whereby the national government want to do connectivity for the entire country, and the county governments, or the 47 counties, whereby we have the national optic project.
Yes.
The issue is this. We need to open up this program to Kenyans, and then Kenyans to understand, whereby we are linking it up with the device management system, that is the DMS, which will likely going to monitor whichever call you'll make, whichever call I'll make, whichever call Wanjiku will make in this country, and that amounts to discrimination on conversation between Kenyans, and start monitoring Kenyans. What are your thoughts at the CSITC?
Secondly, also,
I'm not opening any round two.
Yeah, you're not.
Answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Chair,
Now,
clarification, Chair, is important.
Yes, Posing.
You know, Chair.
Mheshimiwa Posing.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You know, we are here also for people. That's why we are vetting. And as representative of the people, I didn't get my answer properly about the network, Mr. Chair.
Poor network.
Poor network. No, really not. I agree, poor and even no network.
Non-existent network.
Non-existent network in the entire pastoralist areas. An example, so that people don't think that we are talking from nowhere. If you go, like, for example, Tiati, there's no network, and that's why there's insecurity. If there was network, maybe we could have even go to those areas. Baragoi, the entire, come to Marsabit, entire northern chair, it seems maybe the nominee has never been in those areas. Maybe. That's why maybe he might not understand how it is happening. So what is his opinion or take as he might come in if we approve him?
okay. Quickly.
I think the approach should be, if you get this job,
yes.
what are you going to do to have 100% coverage by all these networks across the country?
Yes.
Yes. That is what you want, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
One, as a ministry, so that I pick up that question quickly before I refer to the former, we will ensure that there is adequate ICT infrastructure in these areas through the envisaged 100,000 kilometers fiber optic network. That is one. Then two, we will engage the players correspondingly, the market players, to also ensure that they entrench their services to these areas. If the two go hand in hand, we'll be home and dry. It's as simple as that. Okay? That's why we are coming in as change agents to do it, Mr. Chairman. Let us not be captive to the past. We are coming in.
Don't exchange with him.
I'm addressing you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That's why we are coming in to bring about change, Mr. Chair. My apologies. Yeah. We cannot be captive to the past. We are coming in to offer transformational leadership that is going to introduce radical change so that we are not captive to the status quo. And we will do it, Mr. Chairman. The second question was the issue of data security, Mr. Mule rest. You see, there's the issue of the Data Protection Act on one hand, and the Computer Misuse and Cybersecurity Act on the other, Mr. Chairman. One, the Data Protection Act, among others, is meant to facilitate a situation where data in the hands of the market players is not abused or misused, and the provisions are very clear. So we need actually just to enhance that. And if there are any issues or emerging issues that need to be addressed, again, I've said from the onset that we will adapt a participatory approach and engage all stakeholders so that their views can be integrated into this process. We also need to understand, Mr. Chairman, that the rate of change of legislation or legislative reforms or policy and regulatory reforms is slower than the rate of innovation. So if innovation is ahead of legislation or policy or regulatory framework, then we will definitely introduce changes or propose changes to the existing policy, legal and regulatory frameworks so that it responds to the needs of the market. I believe I've answered.
Tell us in 3 minutes what you wish this committee to do for you.
One, Mr. Chairman, in my concluding remarks, my proposition is that I've got a vision for this sector. My vision is an empowered and digitized Kenyan society. To realize this vision, I believe working together with the team that we have within the ministry and the sector at large, including the implementing agencies, we should be able to facilitate economic transformation of Kenya while leveraging on ICT for purposes of competitiveness and sustainable development. I believe that I'm coming into this sector, Mr. Chairman, to offer transformational leadership, to introduce change, and to realize this, I'll ensure that we have got appropriate planning framework within the ministry and the implementing agencies. I'll ensure that we have got structures that are effectively aligned to the strategy at all levels to facilitate implementations of the plans that we will have. I'll ensure we have got comprehensive performance management framework that will facilitate implementation of these strategic plans, while at the same time also having a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation and reporting framework. This will be anchored on my ability to facilitate provision of transformational leadership that facilitates change within the sector, Mr. Chairman. At the tail end of my tenure, on behalf of government and the industry at large, I would wish that my performance be evaluated on the basis of facilitation of universal access to internet everywhere at affordable rates. I would also wish, which I hereby commit, that my performance should be evaluated on the basis of digitization of government processes to facilitate not just a paperless government, but also to leverage on that technology to create jobs on one hand, while on the flip side of it, also capitalizing on the efficiency and effectiveness that will be facilitated by ICT to reduce the cost of living. I also wish that my performance, Mr. Chairman, as I conclude, will be evaluated on the basis of rejuvenation of the Kenya News Agency, revitalization of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation, and revitalization of the Postal Corporation of Kenya in response to the needs of the market, while at the same time benchmarking with global best practices. The will is there, Mr. Chairman. The capabilities, skills, and experience is there. And I can only promise that given the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, we will deliver on this mandate. We are equal to the task, and we will not let Kenyans down. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's my humble submission.
Thank you, Mr. Eliud Okechewalo. That was an interactive session that has been quite interesting. We want to wish you well and allow you to leave to your other duties. Sergeant, you can show the Honorable Owalo the way out.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
No, you are not.
Okay. Okay.
What is it you want to ask?
I wanted to find out if I can report to office this afternoon.
No, you can't. You are a nominee.
Thank you.